I just took a heavy steel crowbar and ripped my $15,000 custom marble bar counter into jagged pieces. I didn't stop until the expensive stone was nothing but dust and trash on my kitchen floor. You probably think I've lost my mind. You might think the stress of running a $3 million HVAC business finally made me snap. But I'm not crazy. This is the first time in months that I've felt truly alive. I did it because that bar was where my wife and my business partner sat every night, drinking my bourbon and planning to steal my life. My name is Jack. I'm 48 years old. I've spent 25 years crawling through hot attics and frozen basements to build Miller heating and air. I started with one beat-up van and a box of tools. Now, I have 30 trucks on the road and a reputation for being the most honest man in the county. I worked hard so my wife, Monica, could have the best life. I even gave my best friend, Gary, half the company because I thought he had my back. About 6 months ago, I started feeling sick. My head was always foggy. I couldn't remember where I parked my trucks. I felt weak every single morning. Monica told me I was just getting old. She started making me special vitamins and protein shakes. She told me they would help my memory. She'd smile, kiss my cheek, and watch me drink every drop. I felt lucky to have her. I felt lucky that Gary was handling the big contracts while I recovered. I really thought I had dementia. I was scared. I spent nights crying because I thought I was losing my mind. Gary would pat me on the shoulder and tell me to go home and rest. He said he'd handle the bank and the employees. I trusted them both more than I trusted myself. Then 2 days ago, I spilled a glass of water behind the bar counter. I went to get a towel to wipe it up. When I reached under the dark wood frame, my hand hit something small. It was a tiny digital recorder taped to the bottom of the marble. My heart hit my ribs like a hammer. I didn't know why it was there, but I knew it wasn't mine. I took the recorder to my truck and played it. What I heard turned my blood to ice. It was Monica and Gary. They were sitting at that bar, laughing. Gary called me a dying old mule. He told Monica that the fake loans were almost finished. He had been forging my name on papers to drain the company accounts. Monica's voice was cold. She asked how much longer they had to give me the medication. She said she was tired of playing nurse to a man who was already a ghost. Gary told her that once the company was broke, they would buy it back for pennies under a different name. I would be locked in a state home, and they would have the house and the money. They even talked about a trip to Hawaii they wanted to take after I was gone. I sat in my truck for 4 hours. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt a cold, hard rage growing in my chest. I realized then that I wasn't sick. I was being poisoned by the 2 people I loved most. That brings us back to the crowbar. Monica and Gary came running into the room when they heard the first strike on the marble. Monica was screaming. Gary tried to grab my arm, but I pushed him back so hard he hit the wall. I didn't look at them. I just kept hitting the stone. I told them I heard scorpions inside the marble. I told them the scorpions were trying to bite my hands and I had to get them out. I gave them a wild, empty look. I saw the look they gave each other. It wasn't fear. It was joy. They thought I had finally lost it. They thought they had all the proof they needed to lock me away for good. "It's okay, Jack," Gary said, holding his hands up. "The scorpions are gone. Why don't you go to bed? Monica and I will call the doctor to help you." I looked at the broken marble and then at him. I forced a jagged, shaky smile. "Thanks, Gary," I whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without a friend like you." I walked out of the room, leaving the mess behind. The first move was mine. They think I'm a broken man. They have no idea I've already turned this house into a trap, and the police are just waiting for me to pull the string. I woke up the next morning feeling like a ghost in my own home. I made sure my hair was a mess. I put my shirt on inside out. I shuffled into the kitchen, letting my feet drag on the floor like I didn't have the strength to lift them. I needed them to see exactly what they wanted to see, a man who was falling apart. Monica was already in the kitchen. She was humming a happy song while she cleaned up the broken marble from the bar. She looked at me and gave me a sweet, fake smile. She handed me a tall glass of green juice. She told me it was a special blend to help my brain heal from the scorpion scare. I took it and gave her a blank, empty stare. I waited until she went into the laundry room, then I dumped the whole thing down the sink and rinsed the glass fast. I sat on the porch and stared at the trees. To anyone watching, I looked like I was losing my mind, but inside I was working. At midnight the night before, while Monica was fast asleep, I had used my HVAC tools to do some real work. I'm a master at hiding things in vents and walls. I had installed 3 tiny pinhole cameras. One was in the living room smoke detector. One was in the kitchen vent. The last one was in the master bedroom. Gary showed up around noon. He was wearing an expensive leather jacket that cost more than most people's rent. He sat down next to me and told me he had some insurance papers for me to sign. He said the company needed it to keep the trucks on the road while I was sick. I looked at the papers. I knew exactly what they were. It was a document giving him full power to sell my company and my house for $1. I picked up the pen. My hand shook like a leaf. I made a big, messy scrawl on the line. I didn't sign my name. I signed it "Help Me" in a jagged, ugly script. Gary was so excited he didn't even look at the signature. He just snatched the paper away and tucked it into his bag. He told me I was a good partner and that I should take a long nap. That afternoon, I went to my basement workshop. I had a hidden tablet tucked behind some old paint cans. I opened the app and watched the live video feed. I saw Gary and Monica in the kitchen. They weren't acting like a business partner and a wife. They were kissing. Gary had his arm around her waist. He was laughing. He told her that the notary friend he had would fix the signature for a few $100. He said by Monday they would own everything I had ever worked for. Then Monica said something that made my stomach turn. She told Gary that the slow way was too risky. She said the vitamins weren't working fast enough. She wanted to give me a final dose tonight. She said once I was in the care facility, no one would care if my heart just stopped. I sat there in the dark, watching my wife plan my funeral on a tiny screen. I felt a cold, hard rage. I wanted to run upstairs and end it right then. But I remembered what my dad used to say: a man who loses his cool loses the fight. Suddenly, I heard the basement door creak open. I didn't have time to hide the tablet. I heard Monica's heels on the wooden stairs. I had about 3 seconds. I shoved the tablet under an old, oily rag on my workbench and grabbed a handful of sawdust. I started throwing the sawdust into the air and laughing like a child. Monica walked in and stopped. She asked me what the hell I was doing. I told her I was making snow. I told her the workshop was too hot and it needed to snow. I let a little spit trail down my chin. She looked at me with pure disgust. She didn't even come close to the workbench. She just told me to stop being a freak and come upstairs. She said she had made a special steak dinner to celebrate our last night at home before my treatment started. I followed her up the stairs. My heart was pounding, but not because of her drugs. It was the adrenaline. I knew tonight was the night. They were going to try to finish me, and I was going to let them walk right into the trap I had built. I sat at the table. The steak looked perfect. The wine was a deep, dark red. Monica poured me a glass and told me to drink up. She said it would make the snow go away. I looked at Gary. He was watching me like a vulture watching a dying animal. I picked up the glass. I brought it to my lips. This was the moment. The dinner table was a battlefield. I could feel the heat from the candles on my face, but the air in the room was freezing. I held the glass of red wine in my hand. I could see the oily film on the surface of the liquid. I knew it was the final dose Monica had talked about in the kitchen. Gary was leaning so far across the table his tie was almost in his mashed potatoes. He was breathing fast. He told me to drink up. He said it was a toast to my long vacation. Monica was staring at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked like a hunter waiting for a deer to step into the clearing. I brought the glass to my lips. I let the liquid touch my tongue, but I didn't swallow. It tasted like bitter metal. Suddenly, I let out a loud, wet cough. I leaned forward and accidentally spit the wine right onto Gary's white silk shirt. I dropped the glass and it shattered on the floor. Gary jumped up, screaming. He called me a stupid old animal. He started rubbing his shirt, but the red stain was already deep. He wasn't acting like a friend anymore. The mask was gone. He looked at Monica and told her he was done waiting. He said we needed to finish this right now. Monica stood up and walked over to me. She didn't look worried. She looked bored. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a bottle of white pills. She told Gary to grab my arms. She said if I wouldn't drink the medicine, they would make me eat it. Gary grabbed me from behind. He was strong, but I was stronger. I've spent 20 years lifting heavy steel pipes and motors. I let him hold me for a second so I could hear what they had to say. "Just do it, Monica," Gary hissed. "Once he's out, I'll call the facility. We'll tell them he attacked me and had a heart attack from the stress. Nobody will ask questions. It worked with your first husband, didn't it?" I froze. My heart skipped a real beat this time. My wife's first husband had died in a freak swimming pool accident 3 years before I met her. I always thought it was a tragedy. Now I knew it was a rehearsal. I wasn't her second chance at love. I was her second paycheck. This was the close call. Monica reached for my jaw, her fingers digging into my skin. She tried to force my mouth open. If those pills went down, I was a dead man. I couldn't play the fool anymore. I grabbed Monica's wrist with my right hand. I squeezed so hard the pill bottle flew across the room and hit the wall. I heard her bone crack. She let out a scream that sounded like a wounded bird. Gary tried to pull my head back, but I slammed my head into his face. I heard his nose snap. He let go and fell back, clutching his face. The blood was real this time, and it wasn't mine. I stood up. I didn't stagger. I didn't look confused. I looked at Monica, who was holding her wrist and crying. I looked at Gary, who was on the floor, swearing. "The scorpions are gone, Gary," I said. My voice was low and heavy. "But the cameras are still here, and they caught every word you just said about Monica's first husband." Gary's eyes went wide. He looked up at the smoke detector. He realized then that the old Mule had built a cage around him. He tried to crawl toward the door, but I stepped on his hand. I didn't do it because I was mad. I did it because I was being practical. "You think you're smart because you wear a suit?" I asked him. "I built this company with my bare hands. I know how to find a leak in a system, and you two are the biggest leaks I've ever seen." Monica was sobbing on the floor. She started begging. She told me Gary made her do it. She said she loved me and that we could start over. She looked at me with those blue eyes, trying to find the man who used to believe her lies. "The only thing we're starting over is the police report," I told her. Just then the front door burst open. I had set a timer on my phone to alert my old friend, a retired sheriff's deputy named Miller. He came in with 2 uniformed officers. They didn't ask questions. They saw the blood on Gary's face and the broken glass. They saw the digital recorder I had pulled out from under the table. As they led them out in handcuffs, Gary looked at me one last time. He gave me a sick, twisted grin. "You got us, Jack," he spat. "But you're still broke. Check the payroll files. Your company is a hollow shell. I sold the equipment to a buyer in Canada yesterday. You're king of a graveyard." I felt a cold chill hit my stomach. I knew they were stealing, but I didn't know the trucks were already gone. The trap had snapped, but Gary was right. I might have my life, but I was standing in the middle of a ruin. And as I looked at the empty driveway, I realized there was one more person involved. Someone Gary hadn't mentioned. The dark second layer was just the beginning. I stood on the porch and watched the police cars pull away. My house was finally quiet, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a crime scene. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the broken glass and the spilled wine. Gary's voice was playing over and over in my head. "Your company is a hollow shell." I knew Gary was a liar, but he looked too happy when he said it. I grabbed my keys and drove to my office. It was 2 in the morning. The industrial park was dark and the air was cold. When I pulled into the lot, my heart sank. Usually, there are 30 white trucks parked in neat rows. Tonight, there was nothing but empty pavement and oil stains. I walked into the building. The lights in the front office were on. I heard the sound of a paper shredder. It was a fast, rhythmic buzzing sound. I walked toward my office manager's desk. Sarah was there. She had been with me for 15 years. She was the one who sent out the bills and paid the taxes. I had trusted her like she was my own daughter. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She just kept feeding stacks of papers into the shredder. I told her it was over. I told her the police already had Gary and Monica. Sarah stopped the machine. She turned around and looked at me. She didn't look scared. She didn't look sorry. She looked bored. She told me that I was a clueless mule. She said she had been the one really running the company while I was out playing in the dirt. Then she dropped the real bomb. She told me she wasn't just my employee. She was Gary's sister. They had planned this years ago. Gary was the face of the business, and Sarah was the one moving the money. She told me she had spent the last 6 months making a paper trail that made me look like a thief. She had used my digital signature to take out high-interest loans. She had made it look like I was stealing from the employee pension fund to pay for a gambling habit I didn't have. She leaned back in her chair and smiled. She told me that even if Gary went to jail for the murder plot, I was going to prison for fraud. She said the trucks were already on a ship headed for Canada. She said I was broke and my reputation was dead. I felt the room spin. I looked at the empty warehouse through the office window. My life's work was gone. But then I remembered something. Sarah thought I was a mule because I liked to work with my hands. She thought because I didn't use a computer much, I didn't know how they worked. I walked over to the main server in the corner. I pulled a small metal key from my pocket. I told Sarah that I had noticed the money moving 3 months ago. I told her I hadn't been confused at all. I had hired a forensic accountant in secret. Every time she moved a dollar, my guy was watching. I reached behind the server and pulled out a hidden hard-wired backup drive. It wasn't connected to the network. It was an analog system I had built myself 10 years ago. It had captured every single keystroke Sarah had made in the last hour. It had the logs of the fake loans. It even had the GPS locations of the trucks. They weren't on a ship. They were sitting in a warehouse in Buffalo, waiting for a bribe to clear. Sarah's face went white. The boredom was gone. She lunged for the drive, but I caught her arm. I didn't have to be mean. I just held her there. I told her that my dementia was actually just me waiting for her to make a mistake. The front door of the office opened. It was my friend Miller, the retired deputy. He had a big folder in his hand. He looked at Sarah and told her she was a terrible liar. He told her they had already found Gary's notary friend, and he was already talking to the DA to save his own skin. As Miller led Sarah away, I sat down in my old chair. The silence was heavy. I was sitting in a building with no trucks and no money. I had won the fight, but I was standing in the ruins. But then Miller walked back in. He told me the bank had frozen the offshore accounts Gary had set up. He said the money hadn't been spent yet. It was sitting in the Caymans, waiting for a final signature that would never come. He said I'd get every cent back within a month. I looked at the shredder. I felt a little bit of peace. But as I stood up to leave, I saw one piece of paper that Sarah hadn't destroyed yet. It was a letter from my own brother. The dark second layer had a third floor, and it was the most painful one of all. I picked up that last scrap of paper from the shredder. My heart was already heavy, but this was the weight that finally broke me. It was a letter from my younger brother, Danny. He was the one who had introduced me to Monica 3 years ago. I thought he was being a good brother. I thought he wanted me to be happy after my first wife died. But the letter told a different story. Danny owed Gary a lot of money from a bad gambling habit in underground poker rooms. Gary had promised to wipe the debt if Danny helped him place Monica in my life. My own brother had sold me like a piece of used equipment. He was the one who told them about my daily routines and my bank passwords. He was the one who told them I was a soft target. I sat in that dark office and cried, not because of the money, not because of the company. I cried because there was no one left in my life I could trust. My wife, my best friend, my office manager, and my brother. They had all lined up to watch me die for a pile of cash. The trial happened 6 months later. It was the biggest news our town had ever seen. I sat in the front row every single day. I wore my best suit and kept my back straight. I wanted them to see the man they couldn't break. The recordings from the hidden cameras were the star of the show. The jury sat in total silence as they heard Monica and Gary laughing about the final dose of digitalis. They heard Sarah talking about making me look like a criminal to the IRS. When the tapes played, Monica started sobbing, but I didn't see any regret in her eyes. I only saw fear because she knew she had lost the game. Sarah made a deal with the state. She told the police everything about the fake loans and the way they moved the trucks to Buffalo in exchange for a shorter sentence. She got 12 years in prison. Gary got 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder and racketeering. My brother, Danny, was arrested too. He got 6 years for his part in the theft. Then it was Monica's turn. The judge didn't have any mercy. He called her a predator and said she was a danger to every honest man in the country. He sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiffs let her out in handcuffs, she tried to look at me. She tried to say my name with that soft voice she used to use. I just looked away. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a mistake I had finally fixed. It took a long time to get my life back, but I did it. The trucks were recovered from that warehouse in Buffalo and brought home. The money from the Caymans was eventually returned to my accounts after a year of legal battles. I used it to pay back my employees' pensions and clear the debt on my house. I didn't sell Miller Heating and Air. I kept it, but I moved the office to a new building. I couldn't walk into the old one without smelling the shredder and the lies. I'm 49 now. I live alone in my house, and for the first time in my life, I actually like the silence. I don't drink those protein shakes anymore. I make my own coffee, and I check the seals myself. I hired a new office manager, a retired lady from my church who just wants a quiet job and has zero interest in my bank passwords. I never replaced that marble bar counter. I left the floor bare where the stone used to be. Sometimes I stand there and remember the sound of the crowbar hitting the marble. People ask me why I don't fix it. I tell them it's a reminder. It reminds me that a man can build a palace with his hands, but he has to protect it with his mind. The old mule is still standing. I'm still working, still building, and still keeping my eyes wide open. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't always mean family, and a smile can hide a grave. But I also learned that I'm stronger than any drug they could give me. I walked out to my backyard last night and looked at the stars. The air was clean and sharp. The shadows didn't look like snakes anymore. They just looked like trees. I took a deep breath and smiled. The fire was out. The rats were in cages. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The game is over. I won. And that's the only thing that matters.